If you were cursed by hellfire, wouldn't you want to go by the name Ghost Rider? Welcome to Know Your Universe, the series where we cover things that just don't really fit into an origin or a complete story. If you don't know who Ghost Rider is, you're probably only thinking about that Nicolas Cage movie. But there have been a lot of Ghost Riders, and we will get to Johnny Blaze eventually. But he is his own spirit. You see, the Ghost Rider is the current host of a Spirit of Vengeance. But who is the Spirit of Vengeance, and where did he come from? Now, there are multiple versions to this story, but one version states that they originate from 1,000 years ago, created by God. They are here to keep the humanity's capacity for evil in check, and they become bonded with human hosts. This means that there are many spirits of vengeance, but only a few of them have taken the name Ghost Rider, starting with Noble Cael. He grew up with his abusive father, Pastor Cael, and his younger brother in the 18th century. While Noble had many problems with his father, he did eventually meet a girl named Magdalene, and he married her. But sadly, one day Magdalene discovered the horrific truth about Pastor Cael. He was actually a warlock practicing the dark arts. To hide his habits, he accused her of witchcraft and he demanded that she be burned at the stake. But he went even further than that because he knew that Noble would object. So he drugged and tortured Noble and threw him into the church's cellar. Magdalene managed to get a curse off before her death, one that would send furies to take revenge on the pastor and the town. With the town being destroyed and his death shortly to follow, the pastor struck a deal with Mephisto. The deal was that if Mephisto could save the town and the pastor would sacrifice his own son, Noble, to Mephisto. The deal was made and Noble was transformed into the Spirit of Vengeance, the first Ghost Rider. He went on to defeat the Furies, and once the pastor actually offered up his own son for him to eat, he turned away, unable to feast on his own son, even though he was a demon now. At the end of this event, Mephisto arrived and demanded Noble's soul, but Uriel, the archangel, came down and prevented Mephisto from taking Noble's soul since he wasn't willing to eat his own child. It was then decided that Noble would go into the void until called upon once again. Next, we would have a former slave named Caleb from the American Civil War, briefly shown and mentioned whenever they refer to Noble's timeline. After him, there is also a briefly mentioned soldier in World War II, a man that was an adventurer during World War II named the Blazing Skull. We can't confirm if the Blazing Skull was actually a spirit of vengeance, but it sure looks like one. The timeline for Noble would then move to Naomi Ketch. She lived with this curse all of her life, but she did learn how to cope with it, and eventually she fell in love with a man named Barton Blaze, and they had 3 children, Johnny, Barbara, and Daniel. When the curse came back with a vengeance, Naomi decided to fake her own death and take Danny and Barbara with her, leaving Johnny and Barton Blaze all by themselves. This was all a plan to free the oldest child, Johnny, from the curse of the Ghost Rider. But her plans failed because Johnny wouldn't become the Ghost Rider, but he would become a Ghost Rider. And the curse of Noble Cael would just eventually move on to the second child, Barbara Ketch. Now we will finally move to Johnny Blaze, the one that you all probably know. And the Nicolas Cage movie is based kind of on this origin. So Johnny Blaze was a stunt motorcyclist working for a stunt show. The owner was a man named Crash Simpson, and he became a father figure to Johnny, but eventually he was dying of cancer. So Johnny struck a deal with Mephisto to save Crash's life. He would sell his soul if Crash wouldn't die from cancer. Well, Crash's life was spared of cancer, but he died shortly afterwards thanks to a loophole in which Johnny only asked for him to be saved from cancer. Due to the use of this loophole, when Mephisto came to claim his prize, one of the archangels once again stopped him, and they wanted Johnny Blaze to become the host of the Spirit of Vengeance instead. Mephisto agreed to this, but he placed a rogue Spirit of Vengeance inside of Johnny Blaze, known as Zarathos. While Johnny was this different version of the Ghost Rider, where he fought against Zarathos for control of his own body, the Noble Cael spirit continued on, and it was picked up by a man named Max Parrish, temporarily because not only was it attached to the Ketch family at this point, but it was also attached to a medallion. This bond didn't last very long though. Eventually, it would be time for the Noble Cael spirit to come back to the family, and it would return for Danny Ketch. He was the Ghost Rider of the 90s and the second most common Ghost Rider. He wore a black leather biker jacket, spiked shoulder pads, and a mystical chain around his chest. Danny took on the spirit of Noble Cael when his sister was mortally wounded by a demon, so she wasn't able to do it herself. Danny and Noble would then work together cooperatively, unlike the previous Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze. For the record, Danny is the one that pops up most frequently when Marvel uses the older Ghost Rider, because we do have a new one right now. Now, during all of these adventures, there is also a man named Michael, and he was burned with so much hellfire that he was driven insane and he murdered his own family. He then sold his soul to Mephisto to become another spirit of vengeance called simply Vengeance, and he tried to get his revenge against the current Ghost Rider. There's also Alondra, who took over the Spirit of Vengeance during the Fear Itself storyline, but at the ending, Johnny Blaze took it back. And our newest Ghost Rider for the new Marvel Now run is Robbie Reyes. He doesn't drive a bike, but instead he drives what appears to be a Dodge Charger while living in East Los Angeles. He entered a street race one day hoping to use the prize money to move his family away from this area. He ends up being gunned down, but then he finds himself revived from the dead as the latest Ghost Rider. His spirit is a man named Eli Morrow, and he wants Robbie's help in getting rid of the gangs because they were the ones that killed him. Lastly, there is an old cowboy Ghost Rider, and this one is interesting because he has his own family line and story known as the Phantom Riders. Long story short, the one that they use a lot is Carter Slade. Marvel used to call him Ghost Rider until Johnny Blaze was invented, and then they retroactively called Slade and his entire family line the Phantom Riders. The same rules as the Ghost Riders apply though, so it's basically just a separate line of the Spirits of Vengeance. And I hope this helps you understand all of the Ghost Riders. If you have any more questions about the Ghost Riders, let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget, while this is a list of all of the known Ghost Riders, this isn't a complete list of their entire history. If you guys really want it, we can still bust out origins for each one of these, or just the ones you really want. Let us know in the comments down below. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Comicstorian, Instagram at Comicstorian, and Facebook at facebook.com/EligibleMonster. I'm Benny, and I will see you guys next time right here.